Welcome to The Third Chair, a show about real people, real stories, real life. And here are your hosts for The Third Chair, Peter Grigg and Doug Bazeski.
So, tonight we have a special guest who survived an avalanche.
An avalanche.
An avalanche. He survived better than the Colorado avalanche that were eliminated.
Yeah, that was a disappointment.
It was.
Except in Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. And tonight we are wearing the same shirt.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to survive that.
Anyways, let's talk about our guest. He has an MA in counseling and is a licensed practical counselor at the Colorado Springs Rescue Mission, where he has served as the director of addiction recovery and currently is a senior director of health of the programs. As I mentioned, he also survived being caught in an avalanche here in Colorado, where he was carried 1 mile in 1 minute, which is 60 miles an hour. I'm sure there's a story there. Please welcome Joel Siebersma. Well, we're here with Joel. Joel, thanks for coming in and being on the show tonight.
My pleasure.
And as we mentioned in the intro, you've spent some time at the Springs Rescue Mission, where I understand you recently got a promotion. You're now the Senior Director of Health.
Yeah.
Previously, you had been the Director of Addictions and Recovery, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. You also are one of the few people I've ever met in my entire life, and I know a lot of people, that survived an avalanche, which will also be an interesting discussion. And so the question I ask myself is, like, what kind of hobbies does a guy who survives an avalanche have? And we noticed that the other day when in our pre-production meeting, you rode your bike here through an electrical storm. So would you classify yourself then as an avid bike rider?
Maybe not an intelligent one.
I was going to say enlightened.
Yeah.
You rode your bike tonight?
No, I did not. I actually just walked tonight because it was a little bit chilly to ride. But I enjoy riding whenever I can.
Do you do any long distance kind of rides or races?
No. The most regular ride I'll do is I really enjoy Fridays when the weather gets nice. Is I'll ride my bike to work and back. That's a great way to end the week.
You must be a very spiritual person, because I have seen the way some of the drivers are in Colorado Springs towards bike riders. I mean, my goodness, you have to be on your guard.
Yeah. Well. The good thing is the route that I have from my house to the mission, I can do it all in designated bike lanes or on bike paths. The only time I have to cross the road is just Academy. I cross over Academy and I cross over Nevada. And that's it. Everything else
just
is on either.
Academy.
Just Academy and
Well,
yeah.
But if you get out early enough, that's not too bad. So.
Yeah, and I gotta say this thing about bike lanes, because I don't totally get it. Like, sometimes the line is solid, and then when a car needs to make a turn, there's a very brief time where it becomes dotted, where the car and the bike fight for position.
Yeah, car's gonna win that fight 9 times out of 10. So.
Yeah,
I like to see the 10th time.
Yeah, me too.
Let's see you make your escape. Yeah, and so you like to run and jog. And last time we talked, you had said you'd planned on running a 250-mile race or something like that.
Not quite that far, but I really enjoy running, and I like some of the longer endurance events because I'm not fast, but I don't give up. So. I've done one longer race, a 50-kilometer race, comes out to about 32 miles.
There's a number of those in Colorado. I was surprised.
Yeah. And so eventually I'd like to get up to where I do either a 50-miler and then a 100-miler. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I mean, we have one of the bigger 100-mile races up Silverton area.
Yep. Silverton has a really big one called the Hard Rock And that's world famous. Of course, Leadville Ultramarathon is another
That
pretty
one's
famous one.
Too.
Yeah. So Colorado
Free
has some big
advertising for
ones.
those events.
I mean,
Please sign up.
well, they're in the mountains. Not only do you run 100 miles, but you can't breathe the whole 100 miles.
Yeah, you get a lot of up and a lot of down.
Yeah,
So
just-
that's good stuff.
Just
yeah.
remember, if you run into a bear, you just have to outrun the guy beside you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, how high is Silverton? It's like 12,000.
Oh, not quite that high. Silverton, I think, is right around 9.
Oh, okay, 9,000
yeah,
feet.
but that race course does get up over 14,000 feet.
So
wow.
technically,
Yeah.
50 kilometers, that's more than like 26 miles. It's more than a
Right.
marathon.
Right.
I mean, what is it? I don't know what comes out.
32,
30
Yeah,
some
it's
change.
just about 32.
And you know, I'm not a runner, but I have looked at like running magazines where they have these elaborate training schedules.
I'm waiting for the doctor.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. For my orthopedic injury from running, and you know, it's like you're jogging a short distance one day and a longer the next, and one time you're doing 10K. So you know, do you put yourself on a special program?
If I'm training for a specific race, then yeah, I will. And I'll write up a training schedule and kind of go through some training blocks. But like right now, where I'm still trying to pick a race for this summer, and I just try and keep fit and stay in shape and do some longer runs and some shorter stuff. But yeah, for a race like that, for a 100-mile race, you would definitely need a lot of structure, a lot of planning to go into that. They say it doesn't really make a difference in race day. It just depends on how much you want to suffer on race day.
Oh,
So if you want to suffer less, you need to plan a little bit more and kind of structure your
sure.
training. So.
Do you do like special Twinkie carb loading or anything like
Well,
that?
you get to eat these really great things called energy gels or gel packs.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like cake
Wait.
frosting in a package. And you just squeeze it in your mouth. And
So
it's
does it
delicious.
as good as it's delicious?
I like the like chocolate ones and the savory ones. They have like super sweet, like fruity ones. I don't like those as much. But like
okay.
the chocolate caramel, salted caramel, chocolate cake. Yeah, they're
So this is
really
worth
good.
running 50 miles.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you know, something I hadn't thought about. You mentioned it before that you say you have personality-wise, you describe yourself a little bit as an introvert, or maybe a lot as an introvert. And, you know, and probably long-distance running a marathon would be introvert-ish in terms of being with yourself in your own mind. Do you ever look at it that way?
Oh, sure. Yeah, just it's a chance to just kind of let everything fall away and just to spend some time getting thoughts sorted out. And the more miles, the more things just kind of settle in place, right? It's like having a bowl full of all jumbled up stuff, and you just kind of bounce it on the counter, and everything just kind of settles into place. And by the end of your run, most things are where they're supposed to be.
That's good. I know I'd be thinking about during the first 20 miles, like what restaurant I'd be going to when I was done. And would I be having the steak or the spaghetti?
Yeah. Those food dreams will keep you going, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
Now, Colorado is a great state for fly fishing. Do you like to fly fish, or do you prefer to get your fish with explosives? What's your what do you like about fly fishing?
Fly fishing is really interesting. I think a lot of things fascinate me about it. It's delicate. It's also, there's a lot of rhythm to it. There's a lot of just kind of thought and understanding, but patience that go into it. That once again, it's one of those activities that can provide serenity.
I've seen some pretty angry fly
I
fishers.
would imagine that's true. I love doing active things, but I am not a competitive guy in the least. So I can go fly fishing all day long, not catch a fish, and be completely happy, because it's just about the activity. It's about being outside. It's about working on just different aspects of my own development, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fun. It's interesting, and I don't get, there's some guys that have a different rod for every day of the week, and that's not me.
Well, I was thinking, I've got one good friend who loves to fly fish, and he's with his buddies, and if they're catching fish and he's not, it is not a serenity flight,
No.
if that's even a word.
Yeah, no, that's not me. I like just being out there and just being on the water, and you never. I believe it's a Chinese proverb that says you never cross the same river twice, right? And so every catch, the water's a little bit different. The river's a little bit different. And,
Right. Yeah.
just being out there with the rhythms and the beats and the precision, it's fun.
And without putting words in your mouth, you like to be out there with the rhythms and the beats, like without your family.
There are times for fishing with small children, and there are times for not. And to have them in balance is really good.
Yeah, it's a yin and a yang kind of thing.
That's right.
I have 4 kids, and when I went fishing with them, I was like their servant.
Yep.
Like putting on the hook, putting on the worm. They got to do all the fun stuff. I just like ran around and did that.
Yeah, there's a time for a worm and a bobber, and there's a time for a blue wing olive. And those are 2 different times, and you need them both.
And we invite anyone watching our show also to come out to Colorado for great fly fishing. And in a few moments, we will continue to quiz Joel when we come right back. We'll get back to our guest in just a moment. But
Do you have a story to tell?
would you, yes you, like to be a guest on the third chair?
Send us an email and tell us about yourself and your story.
And please follow us on social media.
Now back to the episode. Welcome back to the third chair. And we're here with Joe, and he's telling us about his hobbies and relaxing. But one time you went out with nature and it did not turn out well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it didn't go so well. Almost 20 years ago now, a little bit less than that. Myself and a couple other buddies, we met downtown for a friend's birthday and figured out we all had the upcoming Saturday off, and decided to go up and climb a 14er, and this was in winter, it was in March. And we were climbing a 14er and we triggered an avalanche.
Oh my God.
And I was caught in the avalanche, and another friend of mine was down below us, and he ended up being killed by the slide.
And you were caught in the avalanche, and how long were you in the avalanche?
Well, from what we can figure, we were talking about it afterwards, but we think it was about a minute from the time it started, and it started really close to where I was, just above me, until it finally stopped, and I was at the bottom, kind of in the valley. It was just about a minute total time.
And how far did you go in that minute?
We looked it up later in the avalanche report, and it was just about a mile, a little over a mile
So
length.
you're going 60 miles an hour through the forest.
Yeah, that's about what it was.
So what was on your mind when you were... Do you remember any of this, or did you blank it out?
Yeah, no, I remember the whole thing. And the very first thought that jumped into my mind at that point was, oh God, I don't want to die. Because I knew that was most likely the outcome that was going to happen. And once I was in the avalanche, it's a lot. It felt a lot like being in very fast, very rough white water, like in a river, like in a rushing river.
So, trying to swim.
Yeah, and so the current of the snow, or all the different flows of snow, just kind of tumbled me around, and so I started out, when the avalanche started, I was going feet first down the hill, but soon I got tumbled and flipped over, and I was headed head first down the hill and kind of smashing my face against boulders and stuff, and so I would try and flip around and get my feet headed downhill, so at least I could catch rocks that way, and it would work for a while, but then it would flip me over again, or it would pull me under the surface, and I would be under the surface of the snow for a while, kind of being pummeled, and then back up on top, and I could grab a breath of air, and then flipped around and flipped sideways and smashing my head on things and banging around and
So basically, you couldn't do anything. You had no control.
every time I kind of got to where I was a little bit stabilized, to where I thought I might be able to look around or something, I got flipped over and just head first, or got pulled underneath the snow so where I couldn't see anything, and it really wasn't like riding snow. It was like riding a big old giant wave of heavy wet water.
I was going to say almost like a riptide or a horrible current kind of a thing on the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had been in a whitewater rafting trip earlier, and had gotten thrown out in some pretty good rapids, and that turned out fine, but it felt almost exactly the same because the currents kind of pull you down, and even if you have a life preserver on.
Did somebody rescue you fast that time? Or?
Yeah, that time I popped out in just to a calm part of the river.
Okay.
So that wasn't as dangerous, but yeah.
So you down there, when you finally stopped, were you buried or?
When I finally stopped, when everything finally came to a standstill, I was basically half buried, and I was lying flat, and the bottom half of me is in the snow, and the top half was up.
Could you move your legs and stuff?
I could move my legs and arms, but I couldn't sit up because I was wearing a backpack. And the backpack was buried, and the snow was frozen at that point.
Right.
Because what'll happen is as the snow comes down the hill, it picks up energy and it kind of melts and turns into a slush. But then when it stops, kind of refreezes and solidifies a little bit.
Freezes you in place.
Yeah, and so it gets really hard, and so I had to take off my backpack straps and roll over onto my hands and feet to kind of try and get out of the snow.
How long did that take you?
Well, I rolled over and I was on my hands and feet, and immediately I just saw the snow in front of me just being bespeckled with blood, and I was just dripping blood from my head and my nose, and it was just coloring the ground in front of me. But immediately, it was almost like that the 60-minute stopwatch from the TV show where it just clicks, because I knew that I had 3 minutes to try and find my friend, because the information and the training that I had gotten said someone can survive under the snow for 3 minutes. And so I knew that I had to start looking. And so I had to grab a strap of my backpack and wrench it out of the snow, because tied to the back was my shovel. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled my snow shovel off and I started looking around. And what you're supposed to do if you don't have an Avalanche transceiver is you look for a piece of equipment, and then you start searching in kind of a fan shape uphill from the equipment. And so I found a snowshoe that my buddy had, and so I kind of digged and probed above that, seeing if I could find anything. But it was really difficult because the avalanche had been so long, and I didn't know whether or not the third person in our party was also trapped. And so I didn't know if I should stay down at the bottom at the washout and search for one guy, or if I should make my way back up the mountain and search for the other guy, because I had no idea how many of us were caught. All I knew is that I was alive. And so I searched for a while at the bottom, and then I just kept making my way back up.
So you divided your time, search for a little while for one, search. How would you even decide what to do in a case like that?
You don't have much time.
You don't have much time, and that 3 minutes quickly went by, and so at that point, I stopped searching at the bottom and I put my pack back on. I started making my way back up the hill, and just as you would imagine, in the flow of snow on each side, the right and left side, when the main channel of snow would go around a corner, it would kind of shoot off some of the snow into these side. If it was in a river, it would be an eddy. But there were these side things of snow, and so as I hiked back up, I would stop and just kind of search around some of those side eddies, just in case either one of my friends had been pushed out on the side. and if I got lucky, I could find them. But I didn't find either one of them buried in the snow. But I just kept climbing back up.
And how long did it take you to find the one friend that you did find?
That's a good question. I would estimate that I searched for probably an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, kind of
So
making
all
my
by
way back
yourself.
up. Yeah.
Was he awake when you found him, or was he unconscious?
He was, my other buddy wasn't in the avalanche at all. The three of us were in a line, and the avalanche triggered between me, I was in the middle, and he was on the top. And
so he kept out of it, actually.
Right, he kept out of it altogether.
It's
He watched it
miraculous in
happen,
itself, yeah.
and he actually saw me at the bottom of the avalanche. He saw me get up and start walking around and start hiking. What was really disconcerting was he had also seen me at the top when the avalanche first triggered, and he saw me being bounced and trounced at the first part, slamming my head against the mountain. And at that point, he assumed that I was dead because he saw me getting beat so much.
Yeah.
And so when he saw a figure at the bottom, he assumed it was the third person in our party. He assumed it was Kyle. And so when he was climbing down and I was climbing back up, and we finally came within sight of each other. He was on top of this big rock outcrop, and he kind of stepped out there, and I was coming up underneath it. And he looked down to me and he shouted down, he said, "Where's Joel?" And that was really confusing because I was still pretty sure I was Joel.
So he had lost sight of Kyle and all that.
Yeah, and so he assumed that Kyle was the one that was alive at the bottom and assumed that I was dead. And that's why he shouted down, "Where's Joel?" Because he thought he was talking to Kyle.
Yeah.
And that's when I had to shout back up, "I'm Joel. We don't know where Kyle is."
All right, let's hold that thought for now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue on the subject of avalanches, especially important topic in Colorado.
Coffee of the Kentucky-Arizona Walnut Association?
It's kava.
The national coffee of Kawasaki, Japan?
It's kava.
Hiya!
Is it the secret elixir of the surfers in Hawaii?
Or is it the secret island recipe of Kona, Koala, Kauai, or Cola? It's kava. Kava is Polish for coffee. Here at Kava Coffee, we focus on serving a delicious, high-quality cup of coffee in a space where love, coffee, and people mix into the perfect blend.
We value our relationships with our customers and our roasters. Buy locally whenever possible and truly have the homemade touch. Our pastries, syrups, and even our almond milk are made in-house.
So come on in, relax, get some work done. Enjoy the Kava community, some encouraging words, the Kava Coffee Gang.
Kava Coffee.
Be awake.
Welcome back to the third chair again. I got it right both times. So did you notice that, Peter?
Yes, I know. I think I
Peter.
called it the second chair one time we were filming. You'd think we'd get that right.
Yeah, we had a name of the program remediation with our director that week. So you're talking about avalanches, and you survived an avalanche, and the aftermath of the avalanche. I mean, you have to go tell. I think each of you had either girlfriends or fiancés or wives at the time.
Yeah.
And you had to tell them about what had happened.
Yeah. It was at that time. I had been married for just over a year, and Kyle, my friend who was killed, his wedding was going to be 2 weeks from that day.
Oh my goodness.
And the other friend of ours, Dave, who was on the mountain that day, his wedding was going to be in 6 weeks. And so when we finally made it down to the valley and hiked our way out, it was way later than it should have been. We ended up getting back to the trailhead at about 11 o'clock or 11:30 at night. And had to break into the car because Kyle had driven. It was his car.
Oh, wow.
And so since he was still buried somewhere back there in the mountain, he still had his keys. And so we had to break into his car to get some extra water and food that we had in there, and to try and warm up a little bit because I had snow everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And so we sat in the car for a while, just kind of warming up and trying to decide what to do. And then we decided that we would have to walk down basically toward Leadville to try and find some place to call. And we had just gotten out of the car to start hiking down and see if we could find a cabin or something when a Suburban pulled into the trailhead parking lot. And what had happened was my wife and the two other gals, Kyle's fiance and Dave's fiance, had figured out that we hadn't checked in yet. We weren't back home, and so they had called the sheriff's department. And the sheriff's department said, well, it's probably not that big of a deal. They're probably just, eating pizza somewhere on the way home, and they'll be there in a little bit. And they said, plus, we don't send search crews out after dark. And so what we can do is we'll send someone to the trailhead and see if their vehicle is still at the trailhead. And if the car is still there, then we'll go out with a search and rescue team at first light. But if it's not, that means they're headed home and they had car trouble or they're just sitting somewhere just,
Having a beer or
relaxing.
something, yeah.
And so that was the guy from the sheriff's department who was coming to check the trailhead. And so he picked us up and started driving us into Leadville to take us to the hospital. And it was on that drive down the hill that we finally got we got close enough to town where we got cell service again. And so at that point we had to call, I called my wife, and then Dave called Kyle's fiance, and they happened to be together. They had spent the day together hanging out, and so they were just together at my apartment, and we told them at the same time that Kyle was dead, and that he was.
So there's no doubt in your mind.
Yeah, at that point there was no doubt that he was gone, and so we told him that he was still buried and he was dead.
My God, that had to be a low point.
Yeah, that's a sound that I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm.
Is hearing the sound of Kyle's fiance realize what had happened. That's a terrifying moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have PTSD from this incident as a whole?
No, I never did. I never really had any traumatic stress from it. I never had even survivor's guilt or anything like that. I just had a deep sense of assurance that I had lived because God wanted me to be alive. And I didn't understand why Kyle had died and not me. But God made very clear to me that it wasn't for me to understand. And that's the way it happened, and that I had to just go forward with that understanding. And I just didn't try to make sense of it, because God said, nope, that's what happened, and that's the way it's going to go. And so I can either choose to get angry at that and try and fight and fuss and cry, or I can decide that God is actually God and he gets to make that call, and I don't. And so I'll let God be God. Didn't make it easy, but it made it something that I could get through rather than have it kind of haunt me for the rest of my life.
Now, Kyle's fiance, she had to go through a healing process.
Yeah, she went through a really long grief process that I believe took about 2 years. And she ended up doing some geographical moves in that time. She went back to her home in the Midwest for a while, and then came back here to Colorado for a little bit, and then went back to the Midwest, and just kind of bounced around looking for what was next. Her entire life, marriage, a partner, was gone in an instant. And so she did some odd jobs here and there and stuff like that, but mostly living with family. And but just, it was really neat because she was allowed to be sad for 2 years, and nobody, especially in that group of friends, that group of us that were pretty close, nobody pressured her to be happy or to get over it, and move on. Everyone just let her be her and let her be sad. And I believe that's one of the most important things that allowed her, when the time came, to actually heal truly deeply down, because she got all her grieving out. And she didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to hide, which is so important in that process.
Did your group learn something from watching her heal?
Yeah, we really did. We learned a lot. We learned to trust God with outcomes. We learned that he has ways of making tragedies amazing. I personally learned that I was not uncomfortable being around hurting people, and that was okay, and I didn't mind that. And that actually led me into a career in mental health, and led me back to school for a master's degree in counseling. That's what triggered that next step in my life, was being around Maria and not feeling like I had to make her be okay. I was okay, even though she was sad. And even a year later, when I was really healed and kind of through a lot of it, and she was still sad, I was still okay with that. I was okay with being in different places. And that's what pointed me toward counseling and mental health as a career.
So some silver linings after tragedy for a number of people.
For a number of people, for a lot of us, and to kind of fast forward in her life, she ended up getting married to a different guy, and I was able to be part of that wedding ceremony, and it was great, and they have great kids, and we're still friends, and we've been able to do some trips together, and We did a 10-year anniversary trip where we all went back and climbed the same peak in the summer this time.
I was gonna say, that would have been gutsy in the winter. Yeah.
Took some her friends and family up there, and they got to see the mountain and all that, and we had kind of a reunion up there. And so I think when we allow things to happen in God's timing, it's amazing what He will do with tragedies and situations. And especially in this case, we got to see that really be evident. So yeah, a number of things came of it. But like I said, for me personally, it was getting involved in a profession.
And one thing I want our audience to know is Peter looked this up, and he said about 27 to 30 people die in avalanches every year. A lot of them in Colorado. We might be the -- state or up there because we have these mountains here. And so, I mean, you have to be careful. You hear about people skiing out of their areas. And I mean, you guys are just going on a hike, and all of a sudden, bang. And the other thing is you got a career out of it, and Peter is going to take over the next session when we come back and talk to you about your counseling career.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back to the third chair, not the second chair, and we're with our special guest, Joel Siebersma. Did I get it right?
Close.
Siebersma.
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 There you go.
Is that like, it sounds like...
it's Dutch.
It's Dutch.
It's Dutch. I'm 100% Dutch.
I was going to say it sounded Slovakian. Or,
almost,
Anyways, no, I just have, I have trouble with English, let alone these other languages.
It took me several years to learn it too, so don't worry about it.
I feel bad for your wife who probably had to, learn to say that too. That's probably tough. But anyways, you are down at the Rescue Mission, been there for 13 years. You were involved in the addiction recovery program. Now you're a senior director of health.
Correct.
And so here in Colorado Springs, the Springs Rescue Mission is downtown. What are some of the things that the Rescue Mission does for the community or helps out in the community?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that we do. We kind of divide them into three overall categories: housing, health, and work. And that really describes not only a lot of our activity, but also kind of the outcomes that we want to see in people. And so on a practical level, that looks like emergency sheltering. We're a low barrier emergency shelter. We have like next step sheltering where people can have a little bit of a longer term stay. We do addiction recovery in a residential program and an outpatient 120-day program. We do food as far as serving meals, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. Serving food. We do more long-term sheltering in that we have a sober living home and what we call workforce housing. We also help out with a permanent supportive housing project. We bring a lot of partner agencies on campus that are also engaged in this work, trying to help people. So Department of Human Services and the Veterans Administration, Peak Vista medical providers come on campus. We provide case management on campus to try and help people figure out all the things that they got to do to move forward in their life, and then kind of rank order them and help people decide, well, let's do this one first and then we'll put that one off, but we need to bring this one up, and just kind of help people work through that system.
That's a big deal thing.
Yeah, it gets complex in a hurry.
Yeah,
you know,
do I work on my GED first, or do I need to go get my COVID vaccine first, or do I need to, do that job interview first?
Court fines and court cases and driver's license and job training and all that, and so just kind of getting your head wrapped around how to change your life is a complex thing.
Do you guys get called into court to testify very much? Like on a case of some kind where the judge is interested or the prosecutor is interested in what kinds of things this person's working on, so that we should choose not to put him in jail. That kind of thing. We work quite a bit with the justice system, and that looks a number of different ways. So in the shelter side of things, we coordinate with probation officers and parole officers, and a lot of times they'll even come on campus and they'll meet with their people on campus and do their updates and that kind of thing. Oh, that's good.
And we love hosting them, and the officers can come down and do that. In the 1-year drug and alcohol addiction program, when I was a counselor in that program and the director, that's when I had most of my kind of one-on-one contact with the justice system. And that came in a whole bunch of different ways. That was, I had a staff member, one of my coordinators or my case managers would go into the jail here in El Paso County and recruit guys, do interviews and fill out applications and stuff. And sometimes we would bring guys into the program directly from the jail. We would work really closely with the court system. We would work really closely in that program also with probation and parole. And so when I was director of that program, there were a number of times that I ended up either testifying for one of my guys or meeting with a judge to explain the program a little bit more to him, because someone was asking to be sentenced to the program instead of going to DOC. And so I did a lot of educational, relational, kind of professional work with the court system when I did that.
I think that's good that there are more and more places seeing that drug treatment is probably a better alternative for some cases than just sticking someone in jail. Not every case, obviously, but for many cases.
Right, and there's a lot of factors that go into that, and luckily, I've been impressed in El Paso County with the willingness of the bench to listen to each situation. And we didn't always get our way. Sometimes the judge would say, nope, in this case, because of these compounding factors, I cannot sentence someone to the program. Okay. But a lot of times they would. And I think to their credit. And we worked hard at crafting that relationship with the court system. And if a guy didn't show up from a pass, or maybe he tested positive for one of his drug tests, our first call was to the probation department. And so they would know right away. And the judge knew that we would hold them accountable, probably to a higher standard than their probation officer would. And they would be the first to know if a guy messed up. And so if the judge had him on a zero tolerance policy, then he would get a bench warrant and get scooped back up, and it was really a good relationship.
I liked it, the way it gave people a second chance a lot of the times. Part of the a rescue mission, no matter where you are in the country, historically is associated with church or some sort of religious thinking, let's say, and I saw sort of the value statement or approach. You talked about a verse, Mark 12:30, that said, basically, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that you use that verse as sort of a model in terms of what you offered in the recovery program.
Yeah.
How did that come about? What's the deal with that?
Yeah.
Or what about it did you like?
We like that it really addresses the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we like that provides a framework to hang different parts of a program on, because not everybody is the same person when they come through the door of a program, and so we would have some guys that would come through and they were really highly educated and they had a good job waiting for them, and so they didn't need as much help in kind of the vocational rehab side of things.
Right.
There was still stuff that they would do, but we could kind of customize that. But from the heart side, they were really struggling and really hurting. And so then we pour a lot more attention into this. But it really allows us to kind of craft different levels of programming, and it also makes sure that we're not leaving anything out.
I like that. It can be individualized, and yet you know to check sort of all the different areas.
Right. Because it's really easy to focus on one of them, right? It's really easy to focus on the mind and do a lot of education stuff and sit through a lot of classes and learn a lot about addiction. But if you don't address the heart issues or the soul issues, it's not gonna, it's not gonna grow. You got to do all of it. You got to focus on all of it.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before. It's the idea of recovery capital. I think on average, the difficulty of the clients you take on is much higher than say, wealthier clients, because they have so little capital recovery or resources. They're starting just with sometimes so little.
Yeah.
Isn't that a challenge?
It really is. And that's where, I think the most important and yet the hardest type of recovery capital comes in, and that's that relational capital, right? Because you can have someone who comes in with nothing and no job prospects, no community support, nothing like that. But if I can find a way to start building a relationship with you, if you can come to the understanding that I like having you here, I want to help you, you're welcome here, I see you for who you are, not what you did, that's going to create a desire that's going to say, yeah, maybe I'll give it one more day because this guy's kind of counting on me. And then I'll give him one more day. And it just builds that capital. It builds, if I don't show up, he's going to miss me. If I bounce out of here, they're going to know. And they're going to miss me, and for all the right reasons, because they like having me around, and that makes me try a little bit harder. The thing is, it can be hard sometimes. Like to come up with an extra couple $100, but pretty much everybody in the recovery community can find other organizations or meetings or things where you can go and develop relationships, and even a step further, even develop networks, my goodness, that might be able to help you later. Everyone's capable of doing that. Yeah, finding those connections, finding those relationships. As they say in some recovery circles, I can't stay sober, but we can. Yeah, well, recovery is definitely a we journey. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think when people try to do it by themselves, oftentimes it's a form of beginning to self-isolate and a sign that things are going wrong. But that for another show. Yeah. Anyways, we'll take a brief break, and when we come back in our final segment, we will talk about what, Doug?
Books or movies or family.
Books, movies,
whatever we want.
All right.
That's right. We can be.
And we'll hit that up since we've already covered the heavy stuff, the Avalanche, and the drug recovery when we come right back.
Sounds good.
Hi, this is Peter Grigg on the set of The Third Chair. Our company, 2 Men and a Duck Entertainment, are excited about supporting Quantum Leap Recovery, an audio podcast that talks about all issues about drug and alcohol recovery. So watch for it and listen to it, and it'll be a great time of learning, and hopefully it'll help people that are struggling with these issues have a healthier life. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the Third Chair. Joel, why don't you tell us how we can contact
The Rescue Mission?
the rescue mission?
Sure.
Thank you.
yeah.
Contact where you work.
In the city of Colorado Springs. Yeah, not the
Yeah.
Denver Rescue Mission.
No, they're good. I know those people. They're good people. But
So in case you want to donate time, money.
sure.
Or you're in crisis.
Yeah,
Or you're in a crisis.
if you need a place to stay, the best thing to do is come down to our campus. It's located at 5 West Las Vegas Street. It's just south of downtown. And just come on down, and there's the new welcome center, and you can come and get scanned in and get set up, and they'll tell you where to go and how to spend the night. And so if you need that kind of help, if you're looking for a place to go, just come down to 5 West Las Vegas Street. For other information, the best place to go is our website, and that is www.springsrescuemission, all spelled out, .org. And there you can find information on how to volunteer, how to support us financially, other information about just a lot of the different programs and things that we offer. That's the best place to do that.
And Joe, earlier we talked about you like to read a lot, and I like to read a lot. What are some of the books that are your favorite books?
Yeah, I'm getting more and more back into reading. My wife had been going to a book club for a while, and she kept talking about how much fun it was, and so I started to go, and lo and behold, it's a lot of fun. And so
You're going to a book club?
I'm going to a book club. Yeah, I'm one of those book club people now. What's up with that?
Oh, what's up with that?
Yeah.
That's like people. How does an introvert
I know.
relax with all those people there?
There's not many, and we're all very
Discussing a book.
yes, we're all very introverted in the group too. But so yeah, we've been reading a lot of fun books lately, and on my own, I just finished up reading one that my dad was one of his favorite books, and that was Travels with Charlie.
That's one of my favorites too.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Never heard of it.
Non-fiction.
Oh, wow.
That's because you're from Canada.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
This is how to travel.
yeah. I don't know if there's a Canadian version, is there?
Yeah, maybe traveling on a horse or something. I don't know.
He travels across the U.S. with his dog Charlie.
Yep.
John
Wow.
Steinbeck.
Got his poodle Charlie, and
And one of the
Traveling around.
places he goes is a place I grew up in, North Dakota.
oh really?
Yes.
Huh.
Did you go to Colorado in his travels?
I think he was north of-
He was north. The furthest south he got was Yellowstone.
Okay.
And then went around and then came across 40 through Arizona, and kind of he went through my hometown of Gallup, across into Texas and whatnot. So,
Wow.
And just the little things he would find in certain places he would talk about, and Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie is quite the character in the book, and yeah, it's a good one. My dad really liked that, and so I just recently reread that book again. It's one of my favorites.
So did you have a book? Because sometimes my daughter would recommend books, and I would look at them, and then when I actually read the book, I was like, "Wow, this is really good." Did that happen in your book club? Like you look at it and you think, "Well, I don't know about this," but you really liked it after you read it.
Yeah, there was a book called "Where Did You Go, Bernadette?" That was really fascinating. And when they were first deciding on what to read, and and I have a hard time. I listen to books a lot more than I'll read them, just because it's with the whole running thing. It's easier to listen to a book while you run than to read a book while you run. That causes more injuries, right?
Yeah.
But
especially if you're on your bike.
But that was a good one, and I was kind of surprised by that. But yeah, it's really interesting, kind of a novel.
Yeah. I have to look at that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was The Book Thief.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that one too. Yeah.
When she handed it to me, I said, "Oh, this is about a kid growing up in Nazi Germany." And I'm like, I'm not gonna lie. And I read the book, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like one of the best books I ever read." I mean, it's just a little. It's more written for kids, but it's kind of an adult kid book.
Yeah.
And I just kept getting into this book as I read it. And it was like,
what's this called again?
The Book Thief.
The Book Thief.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we just are a fountain of information tonight on interesting books that the third chair. Well, we don't officially endorse any opinions of any of the guests, but you might want to check out those books. Well, I can see from the clock on the wall that we're out of time. Joel, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap it up tonight?
No. Thanks for having me, and it's been really enjoyable and a lot of fun, and just getting to talk about some of the important things in the world.
Thanks for being here, and
Enjoyed it too.
Yes, and we will put on the screen that contact information for the Springs Rescue Mission, and we might even put on some information about Avalanche awareness as well.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you, and from all of us of the Third Chair and 2 Men in a Duck Entertainment, we'll see you next week, and thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can tell when we upload new video content. Good night.
This has been The Third Chair. Next week, our guest will be Rob Bowen. Want to be a guest? Want to sponsor our show? Send us an email. Please subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media.